This is just a quick response to a one-off comment Rich made in the review of Nightmare in Silver a few weeks ago. Namely that the Cybermen were now up to snuff with the Borg.
Unacceptable.
I need to preface this with two things. One, the first is that I love Rich. I think everything Rich does is fantastic, from queer vlogs to Who vlogs to anything in between. They're just superb. One of the main reasons I finally bit the bullet and went for Who is because of Rich. So, thank you. True. Which is to say that I am a Who noob. A Whoob, if you will. I mean, at this point, I have managed to watch the majority of New Who because that's the way I am with television. Addicted. Although I've plowed my way through the majority of New Who at this point, my loyalties will always be to the Trek. The first duty of every Starfleet officer is to the Trek. Which, as a complete non sequitur to anyone who doesn't have that slightly altered monologue memorized,
the first duty of every Starfleet officer is to the truth.
That's one of the things I actually like about Who, that his first duty is not to the truth.
What do you do? I lied to her, Rory.
Actually, rule number one, Doctor lies. He is such a manipulative jerk, and I love Who for this. He's still the moral center of the show, but he often looks to his companions to straighten him out in that sense. This moral ambiguity gives it a little edge over, you know, the Trek. But essentially, I fashioned myself a Trekkie in 2007 and never looked back, so that's 5 years on you, Who. I mean, sci-fi to me just isn't as tolerable without the slashy subtext.
The captain wants to see you.
I thought she might.
So obviously I have nothing to back this up with, no authority to go off on here, but I am a me-generationer with a camera I couldn't really afford, so here we go.
Allons-y.
Basically, here's the Cybermen. And here's the Borg. I don't really have a problem with either monster borrowing from the other in terms of attributes because they did kind of grow symbiotically, Borg being based off of Cybermen characteristics from the beginning, so, you know, more power to both of you if you can, you know, share things. Yeah. But let's just talk in terms of pure creepiness. The Borg have got you beat, even with this latest episode. So, aesthetically, how do the Borg have the Cybermen beat? On the one hand, you've got drones, these recognizable humans or other species with implants, technology painfully inserted into their flesh, versus the fucking Tin Man from Wizard of Oz, okay? I'm sorry. That's what we're up against here. Not only is the gross out factor important here, but I think it is key that we recognize them as vaguely human. The frightening aspect of both species is that they take the human and they strip it of all its humanness and its personhood. But I think this is better emphasized when you can still identify the newly created being as partially human versus not entirely sure, could just be a robot, you know, all nice and neat and contained within this shell. I think there's some merit to the idea that the fright from the Cybermen could be that they are all created into the same identical thing with no individual characteristics, but I think the contrast between these deformed bodies that are still recognized as what they used to be, combined with the psychological similarity or identicalness that means their individuality, their personhood is gone, serves to emphasize this better. The Borg allows for this psychologically while still emphasizing the physiological diversity of the creatures that were assimilated into the Borg. So, scary, yes. It is this merging of the organic with the technological that is more frightening than simply submerging the organic within the technological. Okay, second up, let's talk about the language that each species uses to refer to itself. The language used to refer to the Cybermen remains firmly in the realm of the technological. You've got Cybermen, you've got upgrade, you've got delete, etc. I'm not like an expert on Cybermen, so that's what you've got. Whereas I think the Borg have a very precise, crisp language that makes use of the organic, specifically the insect realm of this organic thing, and the technological, and merges them, serving to make them more threatening to us as organic beings overall. Drone, Queen, Cube, assimilate, regenerate, nanoprobes, collective implants. Resistance is futile. Moving on to the defining characteristics of these species. Frankly, I'm a bit confused from just watching New Who alone as to the entire history of the Cybermen. I'm gonna have to look that up on Wikipedia, which I will do. But from what I've gathered just from the new series, they were human, and they've had all their emotions stripped away from them in order for them to be encased in these superhuman forms that don't have sickness or weakness or any sort of human frailties. And when they encounter other humans, they either upgrade or delete them. I read a good review of Nightmare in Silver, which said that they were supposed to cherish logic above all other things in classic sci-fi computer villain fashion. But I probably wouldn't have gathered that from just watching New Who alone. But in this latest episode, I think they're demonstrating a few new characteristics which have been with the Borg from the get-go. Namely, a kind of collective consciousness localized in the cyber planner, the Borg Queen. 2, the ability to rapidly adapt. 3, the ability to assimilate all life forms, not just humans. These have pretty much been the 3 defining characteristics of the Borg. So, you know. But like I said, cross-pollination, good for everybody. But what I like better about the Borg is that where the Cybermen cherish logic, the Borg's main driving force is perfection.
Logic is irrelevant.
The Borg don't just convert living beings to their format, they learn from them. The Cybermen seem to just be responding to stimuli and upgrading as a response, whereas the Borg incorporate these upgrades, these assimilated knowledge, in order to grow stronger proactively for the pure goal of perfection.
What, Borg perfection? Precisely.
Frankly, I found the pre-Borg Queen and Borg Sphere era of the Borg much more threatening and creepy. I just don't find it that creepy when I can recognize a hierarchical structure. It's much more threatening for the human mind to contemplate a completely collective structure with no hierarchy and a mind without any individual outlet for a consciousness, without any individual outlet. Whereas when you have the Borg Queen, it becomes an individual thing, centralized, not so good. I mean, a pure collective consciousness is far more threatening to the American ideal of individualism than a hive mind localized in a queen, but both are kind of creepy and threatening, you know. Though, I did appreciate all the female fuck yeah going on at the finale of Voyager with the Seven and Janeway and the Borg Queen all together. Yeah, female fuck yeah. I also loved episodes where they explored the implications of the collective mind. My favorite was the one where only a few, 2 or 3, former Borg drones were still linked, and it drove them crazy because hell yeah, huis clos, no exit, Sartre, hell is other people, l'enfer c'est les autres. Yeah, you go Voyager, you go. I think it was key for the Borg that this assimilation of all other species was there from the get-go, whereas for the Cybermen, it's only now that they've been able to assimilate the Doctor and extend their assimilation capabilities to other species, so they still remain limited in terms of their form and their makeup, structure, etc. So I guess just aesthetically and in terms of their original character design, the Borg come off as more creepy than the Cybermen, and adding a few Borg characteristics tacked on to the end of the Cybermen story isn't really going to even the playing field in my book. Sorry, Rich, but keep reviewing Who. I love it.
Your apology is irrelevant.
Okay, so I just read some of the Wikipedia article about the Cybermen, and apparently, you know, in past iterations of them, they did have more of their organic components visible here and again, now and again, but not to the same extent or disgustingness of the Borg implants. So I still think, in terms of aesthetics, the Borg are a little more creepy for me. The lack of consistency of their story as a whole is a bit confusing for me, but in general, I love Who's flexibility compared to something like Trek, which is limited by the internal logic of its system. Who doesn't really have internal logic, so yeah, it's pretty flexible, it's pretty great, you can do anything. Trek, you're a little too uptight.
He just kept talking in one long, incredibly unbroken sentence, moving from topic to topic so that no one had the chance to interrupt. It was really quite hypnotic.
Last side note, my favorite thing ever happened with my little French kid who I babysit. He invented a verb for my obsession with Doctor Who. He loves to do little announcer voices about like, le nouveau film de James Bond starring la fille au père Sage, you know, dun, that's me. But today his thing is like, oh, welcome, you will see the au pair who's on trial for converting the children to Doctor Who. He created a verb, Doctor Who tisait, elle a Doctor Who tisait les enfants. And it's like, yeah, I love that. Doctor Who tisait. Elle est Doctor Who Ticien or something. I don't even know what he said, but it was beautiful. Doctor Who tisait. Yeah, allons-y.
Allons-y.
Live long and prosper.